Are we broadcasting already? Okay. Just a moment. I'll try and sort this out a little at least. I don't know why people put knots in these things. It's just beyond me anyway. What to do? Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Look at that. We did it. Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. Anyway, okay. Jai Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Gopi Jana Ballava Giribaradhare Gopi Jana Ballava Giribaradhare Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachare Yamunatira Vanachare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Gopi Jana Ballava Giribaradhare Gopi Jana Ballava Giribaradhare Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira vanachare. Yamunatira vanachare. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare. Jai Nitai my Pochandra, Nitai my Pochandra, my Pochandra. Jai Nitai my Pochandra, Nitai my Pochandra, my Pochandra. Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jaya Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajakacharya Status Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Shri Shri Nitai Mayapur Chandra Ki Srila Prabhupada Ki Sankirtan Yagya Ki Go Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 13, the appearance of Lord Varaha, text 35. Rupam Tavaitan Nano Dushkritatmanam Durdarshanam Deva Yad Advaratmakam Chadamsi Yasya Twachi Barhi Romas Ajyam Drishi To Angrisho Chatur Hotram Rupam Tavaitan Nanu Dushkritatmanam Durdarshanam Deva Yad Advaratmakam Chadamsi Yasya Twachi Barhi Roma Sho Ajyam Drishi Twangrishu Chatur Hotram Rupam Tavaitan Nanu Dushkritatmanam Durdarshanam Deva Yad Advaratmakam Chadamsi Yasya Twachi Barhi Roma Sho Ajyam Drishi Twangrishu Chatur Hotram Rupam Tavaitan Nanu Dushkritatmanam Durdarshanam Deva Yad Advaratmakam Chandamsi Yasya Twachi Barhi Roma Sho Ajyam Drishi Twangrisho Chatur Hotram Rupam form Tava your Etat this Nano but Dushkrita Atmanam of souls who are simply miscreants. Durdarshanam, very difficult to see. Deva, O Lord, Yat, that, Advara Atmakam, worshipable by performances of sacrifice. Chandam se the Gayatri Mantra and others. Yasya, whose, twache, touch of the skin, bardhi, sacred grass called kusha, romaso, hairs on the body, ajyam, clarified butter, drishi, in the eyes, tu, also, angrisho, on the 4 legs, chatuhotram, 4 kinds of fruitive activities. Translation: O Lord, your form is worshipable by performances of sacrifice, but souls who are simply miscreants are unable to see it. All the Vedic hymns, Gayatri and others, are in the touch of your skin. In your bodily hairs is the kusha grass, in your eyes is the clarified butter, and in your 4 legs are the 4 kinds of fruitive activities. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. There is a class of miscreants who are known in the words of Bhagavad Gita as Veda-vadi, or so-called strict followers of the Vedas. They do not believe in the incarnation of the Lord. What to speak of the Lord's incarnation as the worshipable hog? They describe worship of the different forms or incarnations of the Lord as anthropomorphism. In the estimation of Srimad Bhagavatam, these men are miscreants. And in Bhagavad Gita chapter 7 verse 15, they're called not only miscreants, but also fools and the lowest of mankind. And it is said that their knowledge has been plundered by illusion due to their atheistic temperament. For such condemned persons, the Lord's incarnation as the gigantic hog is invisible. These strict followers of the Vedas who despise the eternal forms of the Lord may know from Srimad Bhagavatam that such incarnations are personified forms of the Vedas. Lord Boar's skin, his eyes, and his bodily hair holes are all described here as different parts of the Vedas. He is therefore the personified form of the Vedic hymns, and specifically the Gayatri Mantra. Rupam tavaitan nanudushkritatmanam durdarshanam deva yad advaratmakam chandamsi yasya tvachi barhi romashu ajyandrashi twangrishu chaturhotram. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyachadeshtarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Vanchkalpatarubhyas cha kripa sindubhya evacha, Patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Yes, so this is sages, the sages are glorifying Lord Varaha, and in 4 verses, beginning with this verse 35 that we're looking at, in 4 verses they're describing how the body of the Lord is a manifestation of all the different items generally, regularly used in the performance of sacrifice. Yes. So Srila Prabhupada is, well, we see here that his that his bodily hairs are the kusha grass. Kusha grass it's an important item, at least very traditionally used in fire sacrifices. It doesn't really grow natively here, to my knowledge. I'm sure we could grow it. But yeah, it's actually his bodily hair, or it can be seen like that in terms of a concept like the universal form. In your eyes is the clarified butter, the ghee, that's the ghee. So the ghee is coming like tears from the eyes of the universal form, from the form of the Lord, for being offered in the sacrifice. And the 4 legs of Lord Varaha, they are the different kinds, 4 kinds of fruit of activities, means like fruit of sacrifices, and, well, it's actually described. Let me just locate it. It's described by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his purport to this verse, that these are, Chaturhotram refers to the 4 actions in the process of sacrifice: Hotra, Advaryo, Udgata, and Brahma. In a very traditional Vedic sacrifice, it could be Karmakandya, or it could be for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There are 4 aspects to the sacrifice, and generally there is a priest in charge of each one. So there's the Hotra priest, Advaryu priest, Udgata priest, and Brahma priest, and they're chanting different mantras in terms of the different aspects of the sacrifice, the fire sacrifice. And then you'll see tomorrow it goes on, that it's like a description of the universal form, effectively, but in terms of the different items used in a traditional fire yajna. But we see that Srila Prabhupada, in his purport, he focuses so strongly on, it's part of the verse itself, duskrita atmanam, souls who are simply miscreants. They're just miscreants. There's nothing more you can say about them. You can't really say anything good. I mean, if you really wanted to try to say something good, you could say that they try to follow the Vedas, but they follow the Vedas in all in particularly certain types of wrong ways. And therefore, even though they try to follow the Vedas, they just offend the Vedas. So therefore, you can't really say anything good about them. Dushkrita. Krita means activity, and dush means, it's a form of dur. It means very bad. very bad. Dur also means very distant, long way, very difficult to achieve. So for these people, any benefit is very hard to achieve. And it's interesting that these people are described in some detail in the Ishopanishad. Let us just, Prabhupada explains to some degree, but where is it now? Oh gosh. It's in the Ishopanishad, yeah. Ishopanishad, excuse me. It's in the purport of verse 9. Prabhupada says, according to Bhagavad Gita 242 and 715, mistaken mundane educators are known as Vedavada Rata. Vedavada Rata is the term he uses. And Mayaya Parita Jnana. They may also be atheistic demons, the lowest of men. Those who are Vedavada Rata pose themselves as very learned in the Vedic literature, but unfortunately they are completely diverted from the purpose of the Vedas. And you must know, anyone who's completely into something, well, they're completely into it. It's not really possible to be more into it if you're completely into it. In Krishna consciousness, of course, in a very positive sense, we have the idea of perfect, more perfect, and most perfect. And most perfect means completely perfect. Well, at least it means most perfect. But in Krishna consciousness, we also have even more perfect, much more perfect, most perfect, mostest perfectest, and excuse me, but trying to keep you awake. Not just that, but yeah, there can be higher levels than perfect. Because strictly speaking, perfect means it cannot be improved. It has been improved to the maximum degree possible, and it cannot be further. If you try to change it now, you will only make it less than perfect, because it's perfect now. So any attempt to make it quote unquote better will only make it worse. This is perfect in general understanding, but in Krishna consciousness we have more perfect and even more and most, but even more, and it's actually unlimited. In the 4th chapter of the Adi Leela, there it's described how Krishna and the gopis, they have this competition. The gopis to see how beautiful they can make themselves, and Krishna in appreciating their beauty. And as they make themselves as beautiful as possible. It's perfect. But when Krishna sees them, he becomes very inspired, and that inspires them to make themselves even more beautiful, which inspires him further. So he becomes more inspired, and they see it. So they become more inspired to make themselves even more perfect, and they do. And when Krishna sees that, he becomes more inspired, even more. And they see that, and they become even more beautiful. And I mean, we could go on for the rest of our lifetimes just repeating that sequence. And Chaitanya Charitamrita says that there's no limit to it. It just goes on. Krishna's more, they make themselves more beautiful. Krishna's more inspired. They become more beautiful. Krishna is more inspired. They see that. They become more beautiful. And it can go on forever. So, these Vedavada ratas, if you're familiar with Bhagavad Gita chapter 7 verse 15, Bhagavad Gita chapter 7 verse 15, Namam duskritano mudha prapajante naradama mayaya paritagyana asuram bhavam ashrita. So these people, their first thing is, their knowledge is stolen by illusion. They just don't understand. They think they understand the Vedic literatures and all the concepts there, and in this particular case, the natures of the different forms of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They think. But Mayaya parita jnana, Maya has stolen their knowledge. So they're actually, they just don't understand at all. And because they have this deviant mentality, which they're extremely proud of, so they're considered Naradama. Naradama means Prabhupada translates it here in this Bhagavad Gita chapter 7 verse 15 as lowest among mankind. Lowest among mankind. And on the basis of their just not understanding the Vedas, and therefore Maya paritagyana, just not having the knowledge. If they ever had it, it was stolen and they don't have it anymore. So their attitudes become so negative that they're considered Naradama, the lowest amongst mankind. You know, there's a few categories of people who just naturally fall into the overall category of Naradama, lowest amongst mankind, like the staunch politicians who just by any means they'll try to get power. Or the big businessmen who just don't care about their workers. They only care about making money and nothing else. Like I read actually, maybe, I don't know, several to 10 years ago or something like that, I read a report in some news thing that in one company where they have a production line and there's a number of people at different points in the production line who adjust whatever is going through the line, the product. So after they've all done whatever it is, then the product comes off the end of the production line as they want it, you know, like in some very sellable state. But the problem was, you know what the problem was? If one person on the production line failed to adjust the product in the way he's meant to, then the whole thing would be useless, because the product would come off the end of the production line and just be lacking some essential feature which that person was meant to put into it. You get the idea? So, yeah, it's just a waste. So the problem, a problem they had, believe it or not, devotees, and this was what I read about, was that occasionally someone on the production line, devotees, believe it or not, would die in the middle of the production line. And so the whole production line goes down and they've got to get someone else on. So the report was, how quickly can they get someone to take his place on the production line and get the production line moving again? Yeah. Get the dead body out of the way. Get someone who knows how to do, whatever the thing is. Get him on the line and get the line going. And they had it down to something like 5 minutes and 16 seconds. And this was a report on this, and it's like, well done. Good work. Got the production line going. Get the dead body out of the way. Who needs it? So this is Naradama. Don't care. Don't care about people or anything except your profit, or like the politicians don't care about anything. Truth, untruth, criminal activity doesn't matter as long as you get power or keep power. Like I remember, don't tell them I'm saying this, but you remember in July, was it 2022 or 21, when they had the big riots? Was it 21? When they're breaking into all the big, the supermarkets and warehouses and just stealing everything. The police did nothing for 2 days. It's all going on. There's this massive billions of rands of theft going on. And pictures in the newspapers of people walking away, people from the location. They're people, but they're very poor people, walking away with these gigantic dining tables worth thousands and lounge suites worth, 50,000 rands. And there was one picture, this woman, somehow she and maybe family members, whoever, they stole a lounge suite worth 50,000 rands. And she was sitting on it outside, because you know what? She couldn't get it in through the door. And this was the picture in the newspaper. And the police did nothing for 2 days. Literally nothing. After 2 days, they started doing something as opposed to nothing, but not very much. They didn't come in and just, take charge and stop the crime. So Haribol. Why? Because they were the people. They were all Zulus who Cyril Bai Ramaphosa, the president, needs to get votes from. So if they had taken a hard line, would have lost the votes. That's serious. So that's Maya Paritagyana. But also they're mudha. They're fools, And they're also asuram bhavam asrita, or asura bhava, demons, because they're staunchly opposed to the Supreme Personality of Godhead in different ways. So therefore here, in the verse itself, it talks about dushkritatmanam, durdarshanam, that for these dushkritatmanam, Prabhupada translates as souls who are simply miscreants, just through and through, from head to toe. They're simply miscreants. It's very, the Vedavada people, it's very interesting. They are members of all four categories, of all four of the more or less hopeless cases who are rejected in Bhagavad Gita chapter 7, verse 15. Others, like the businessmen and the politicians, they're heartless and just happy to exploit. So they're Naradama, but they're not Mayaya Paritagyana. They're not like intellectuals, philosophers. They're not mudhas, like stupid idiots. Yeah, they're specifically Naradama. And the materialistic philosophers, they are Mayaya Paritagyana. They have intelligence, so they think of very clever ideas, which are all wrong. So, or maybe not all wrong, but essentially completely wrong. So they're Mayaya Paritagyana, their knowledge is stolen by illusion, but they're not really Naradama. And they're not mudhas, they're not fools. And they're not duskritana. Well, what? Anyway, yeah. Mudha, Mayaya Paritagyana, Naradama, Asram Bhava. They're not some of them are theists. They're not necessarily atheists. But the Vedavada Rata, Prabhupada says, they're simply miscreants. There's nothing good about them. Yeah. Their position in terms of possessing these detrimental characteristics, their position is complete. They have all the qualities. So here then, Prabhupada, in the purport of this Bhagavatam verse, Prabhupada's describing them, they say they're strict followers of the Vedas, but they don't believe in the incarnations of the Lord. And, particularly the more, you could say, unusual by ordinary material standards, like in this case, the Lord appearing in the form of a hog. When they hear this, they think, no, not possible. But little do they know, it's definitely possible. He appears in every species. Not in every species, but he assumes forms like those of all the species. So these people think, these Vedavada Rata people, they think this is anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism means that you attribute human qualities to something which is not human, which is subhuman. but you attribute human qualities, in this case to a hog. Here's a hog, and the hog is portrayed as talking. Not just talking, but talking very elevated, extremely elevated and complex philosophy. So they can't accept that this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he has actually accepted this form. Okay. He's actually accepted this form, but he's still the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Like Lord Varaha killed the sort of first demon, Hiranyaksha. Actually, Hiranyakashipu was first, because he came out of the womb the second. Did you know that? With twins, the one that comes out of the womb second is older. We're talking about seconds or minutes, because he's further up, because he was first. The first egg that was fertilized is further up in the womb, and the second egg, which is fertilized, is closer to the exit area of the womb. So Hiranyaksha was, in that sense, it's sort of a little technical, but it's something. He was the second. Yeah. So not just talking English, which is, real Sudra language, but talking Sanskrit and killing some amazing, gigantic demon. What to do? So, just for anyone's, information, we just got a message from Swarup Damodar Prabhu. Kadamba Kanana Maharaj is in the process of departing. I think we should just carry on with the class. Are you okay with that? You okay with that? You okay? Good. Okay. Yeah, so they think it's just anthropomorphism combined with exaggeration, but little do they know that it's just true. It's simply true. So therefore, Prabhupada says that not only are they miscreants, duskrita, but they're also fools, they're also the lowest of mankind, and their knowledge has been plundered by illusion due to their atheistic temperament. Yeah. And for them, what the verse said, which is interesting, durdarshanam, that therefore the forms of the Lord are durdarshanam. Dur, meaning, in this context, very difficult. Very difficult. In the previous verse, dushkrita, it's actually the same prefix. Dur is the prefix, but it changes, the end changes to sh through Sunday. So, very difficult to see. They can't even see the Lord. At least they can't, if they're able to see with their eyes, but they don't actually see him for what he is, so they're not really seeing him. Just like if someone sees Shankaracharya's example, thinking a rope to be a snake, So they're seeing a snake. They're not actually seeing the rope. I mean, they're seeing the rope, but they're seeing it as a snake. So it's not like they're really seeing the rope. It's a different type of experience. So these people see the different forms of the Lord, but they see them not as the Lord. They see them as in some anthropomorphic way, or that they're just imagination, or something like that. So therefore, the verse says, the way Prabhupada translates it, they're unable to see the form of the Lord. Just like we know when Krishna and Balaram entered the wrestling arena in Mathura to wrestle with Mushtika and Chanura in front of King Kamsa, then different people who had different concepts of them, different attitudes and different understandings, different concepts of who they were, saw them in different ways. The elderly people, they saw them as these, they're these wrestlers, they're just these big, powerful men. And there's Krishna and Balaram. They are at that point 11 years old. And they're very beautiful. They're not like bodybuilders or anything like that at all. So they saw them, the people, the parental type of people, saw Krishna and Balaram as these helpless little boys. And they're thinking, this is unfair, this is terrible. How can they do this? It's wrong. Make these boys fight against these big wrestlers. But then the young girls, the same age, like teenage girls, they saw Krishna and Balaram as the most incredibly beautiful young boys. Just in a romantic way. The wrestlers themselves saw Krishna and Balaram as death personified. Then there were some, what would you say? Well, there were some impersonalists there. And as far as they are concerned, Krishna and Balaram are just Atma, spirit, soul. So when Krishna and Balaram entered the arena, they saw these two little lights moving across the arena. They didn't even see them as persons at all. And there were some people, they're the forerunners of Buddhists, because the Voidist philosophy was existing before Buddha appeared. But they were not called Buddhists, of course. They were called Kshanik Vijnanavadis. The Kshanik Vijnanavadis, they're Voidists. Shunyavad, nothing exists. So when Krishna and Balaram entered the wrestling arena, what did they see? Nothing. At least the impersonalists saw spirit souls. But these voidists who feel shunyavad, nothing exists, they saw nothing. All in terms of their consciousness. Yeah, so these Vedavadi people, Prabhupada's describing here, he's applying this verse or this part of the verse to them. They are unable to see the form of the Lord. Certainly they're unable to see the form of the Lord as worshipable. Yeah. So Prabhupada says they despise the eternal forms of the Lord. Okay, anyway. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Sir, you have a question, is it?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So, one thing that I know that I'm aware of, if we put different people in this room who have different trainings, they will see different things. Someone who's been trained in the art of mixing color will probably know what that color is, and everyone else who's not trained in that won't be able to tell. And the electrician would be able to tell where the wires on the walls are,
Okay.
where someone else who doesn't know electricity wouldn't be able to
Okay.
tell.
We get it.
Those kind of make sense because there's a training that came before that allows you to perceive certain things. And I was
Right.
just wondering, when it comes to how we perceive the Lord, like what informs that? Is that
Okay.
also the education that we get as we grow up?
Well, that's a good point. Good point. I mean, what you're saying is the same thing, really, because of these different people who are observing Krishna and Balaram entering the wrestling arena. They have different attitudes because of their upbringings and, training, you could say, what they've been exposed to and all that. So therefore they're seeing Krishna and Balaram differently. I mean, really differently. Like some of them are seeing Krishna and Balaram, they're 11-year-old boys. Some of them are seeing them as like man mountains, like these big wrestlers, bodybuilders, just massive. But they're not, they're young boys. So it's related to what you're saying. It's related. So, but what informs our attitude towards the Lord ultimately is what we've heard, and therefore we should be very careful about what we hear in relation to everything, actually, but particularly in relation to God. Because if you hear the wrong things, then like these very people being described here, the Vedavadis, they have been, you could say, trained or exposed to certain types of ideas, and they have accepted them. And therefore they are just completely, they just really don't understand in truth who the Supreme Lord is. So, therefore, association, who we associate with, particularly in the sense of who, not just who we hang out with, although, that's also there, but who we listen to, whose association we accept, means whose ideas we accept. We should be very careful, and particularly we should associate with devotees, because you'll get the right ideas. And, whatever right ideas we already have will just be strengthened and deepened like that. So therefore, very good point. We should associate with devotees. There's a saying, if you associate with thieves, you become a thief. I know just from my own experience, there's not exactly a saying, but you apply the principle. If you associate with vegetarians, you become a vegetarian. That's how I became a vegetarian. Because everyone in the house, it was a hippie house, they were all vegetarians. And the cooks were vegetarians. We had no choice. So we have to be careful who we associate with and avoid wrong association. Particularly association which will undermine our understanding of God and our faith in God. Yeah. So therefore we should associate with devotees. Thank you. Yes, Prabhu. Okay. So the question is, the Mayavadis and Shunyavadis, which is worse, or who's what? So the Mayavadis think Mayavad. Their knowledge is illusory. So they see this world, but the advanced Mayavadis just see it as Brahman. They think it's all one, and all the, like individualities and just all the different things, the buildings, the cars, the people, the animals, you name it. All the differences are illusion, Mayavad. But actually it's all one. There's just a great oneness, which is God, which is not accurate, certainly not entirely accurate. But the Buddhists or the Shunyavadis, Shunya means nothing. Even in modern day Hindi, and I assume Gujarati, Shunya means zero. So it's knowledge of zero, that nothing exists. We're looking at this world, and we're looking at ourselves, but the world doesn't exist, and even I don't exist. And all the explanations which the Shunyavadis, typically the Buddhists now, all that knowledge to convince us that nothing exists, all that knowledge doesn't exist also. So it's a very confused situation if you really get into it. That which convinces you of the philosophy doesn't exist. That's Shunyavad, knowledge of nothing. And which is worse? They're sort of kind of pretty equal, but the Mayavadis, the Shunyavadis just write everything off as being nothing, including the forms of the Lord. They don't exist. But the Mayavadis attack the Lord philosophically. Like, he has no legs, he's lame. He has no brain, he's stupid. Like this. So they take an aggressive position anti the Supreme Lord. So therefore, our acharyas, they're opposed to both and they argue against both, but ultimately the followers of Shankaracharya could be considered the worst. Because they make a point of being anti, like these people, the Vedavada Rata people. They're specifically anti, and they spend a lot of time arguing against the incarnations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Whereas the Buddhists, they may do to some degree, but mainly they just overlook them, just not interested. They're sort of in an unconscious state. And not exactly like a specifically aggressively opposed condition. Hare Krishna. Yes, Prabhu.
Maharaj, you mentioned that Krishna sometimes comes in, or he comes in all the different
Yes, right.
Is it for the same purposes, for the devotees and stuff?
Same purposes.
Do you have something from
Well, on some, Lord Varaha, Lord Matsya. Matsya came in the form of a fish. Nrsingadev is interesting. He's both human type and animal type. Yeah. And then there's Anantashesh, the Lord in the form of a snake. Mohini, the Lord in a female form. But I mean, this Srimad Bhagavatam is not trying to cover every form of the Lord who's ever appeared, but just giving us some insights like that in principle. Okay, Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.